Hi there, and welcome to the 13 Days of Halloween with me, your host, Eddie Spuhghetti. Leading up to Halloween, I'm going to be discussing my favorite films, TV shows, and TV specials, stuff that I think works extra well around the spooky time of year. So with that, let's talk about my pick for this video. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, 1982, written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, starring Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, and Dan O'Herlihy. Doctor and part-time dad Dan Chalice witnesses a very bizarre murder while on the job. Murder of an employee of a factory called Silver Shamrock Novelties, very, very famous for having these 3 Halloween masks that are all the rage. The daughter of the employee, though, thinks that there's something else going on with this murder, and she decides to investigate, and of course, Dan can't pass up the fact that there's this attractive 20-something-year-old lady who wants his help. So he grabs a 6-pack and they're on the road. So besides the fact that this movie is really good and it is very interesting in story-wise what they went with, the history behind it is actually even more fascinating. See, essentially, yes, this is a sequel to Halloween 2. Yes, this is a sequel to Halloween, but it's not a true kind of sense of a sequel. See, essentially what happened was in the early 80s, John Carpenter kind of thought, hey, listen, we don't want to keep bringing back Michael Myers and killing him and that sort of shit. So our approach instead is going to be, we're going to turn this entire series into an anthology series in the sense of a Twilight Zone kind of thing. And the idea was that, Michael Myers terrorizing Haddonfield, that was one story that took place on Halloween. Here's another. And unfortunately, people didn't really find it too interesting, and they wanted to get Michael Myers back, and it bombed, and critically, people didn't like it, and yeah. But it is not a shit film. So there is going to be a lot of comparisons between the first 2 Halloween movies and this one. And one of the things that this one actually does better than the first 2 is it really nails the holiday tone. So the first 2 obviously were set on and around Halloween. There were pumpkins in them, there were decorations, that sort of thing. But this film, though, has to do, the story itself has to do with the origins of the holiday, the pagan shit, all that kind of creepy ass shit about like ghosts and spirits and like sacrifices and that sort of stuff. It really has to do about that directly. It's not just a story set on Halloween. This one also has to do with capitalism. So the big part of this is that we have a major novelty company who has created these 3 masks that everybody's going ape shit for. And there's something actually sinister behind it. You don't really know exactly what it is until a little bit later into the film, and we kind of figure out what the whole kind of master plan is behind these masks. I won't ruin exactly what it is. Yes, it is something evil. Yes, it's going to fuck up a lot of people. But I can't ruin it. But it's great. The music, okay, first 2 Halloween films obviously have wonderful scores. In fact, if anything, I love the second one better than the first one. But this film does more with atmosphere, I would say. The first 2 movies had to do a lot with having themes for Laurie and the character of Michael and that stalking stuff and, creating the kind of intensity and that sort of shit. Whereas this one has to do more with atmosphere and a sense of dread and hopelessness and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of really nice scenes here where the score has been masterfully crafted by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth. Just scenes where you're looking at, a countryside in Northern California and this creepy little town where the factory is set in and how like desolate it kind of feels. And there's this sense of hopelessness and that our heroes really are probably not going to succeed in trying to fuck them over. It is really wonderful. It's a really nice score. Now, despite the fact that this follows 2 tried and true slasher films, Halloween 1 and 2, this is more of a sci-fi kind of horror film. There is a big element of technology that has to do with the storyline, and the technology aspect of it makes sense because when this movie came out, tech in the home life was starting to really bump itself up. We're moving away from Atari game systems and into personal home computers. So everything in general, there's a sense of like technology is kind of being driven up. And if anything, it helps this movie really cement itself in its time frame because it is a reflection of how technology at that point in time was starting to ramp itself up and become very easily accessible to a whole bunch of people, other than just game systems and arcades. Now, naturally, like a lot of people who initially got into the Halloween series, you hear about this film and you hear about the reputation that it had, and you're kind of hesitant. and put emphasis on had. So this movie had a very bad reputation in the early 80s. It killed the franchise. It did not do very well at the box office. Critically, it was a mess. And people who went to go see it were expecting another Michael Myers story, and that's not what they got. However, over the years, it's found a new audience. People respect it for what they tried to do. They see it as something that was, a risk that was being taken. However, it's a very well done film, and it's got a very interesting story, and it's creepy, and it's probably one of the best Halloween holiday themed kind of movies, kind of like Trick or Treat. It's a story that has to do actually about the origins and the holiday itself. It's not just taking place on Halloween. And I was pleasantly surprised. I was very happy when I watched this movie. I thought, holy shit, what were people thinking back then? This is a wonderful little science fiction horror movie. Very surprising, though, that it was more sci-fi than I expected. I kind of thought that it was going to be a lot more of a straight horror film. I wasn't expecting the technology aspect of it. But that's not bad. That was actually kind of cool. And I think that it even helps it stand out more from other Halloween focused kind of movies, especially obviously the Michael Myers series, but the fact that it's very much a sci-fi horror movie that does its own thing. I thought that was really cool. Well, that does it for this installment of the 13 Days of Halloween. Thanks for joining me. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, not a bad movie on its own, and especially not a bad sci-fi horror film. I think you'll really enjoy it if you're looking for something kind of like Halloween and Halloween 2, but a little bit different. Well, join me for the next couple of days leading up to Halloween, as we'll be discussing more of my favorite films, TV shows, and TV specials, stuff that I like to watch around this time of year and that I think you would be into as well. Until then, we'll do lunch.